Sister kicked me out, and my parents supported her. Now your room will be hers, Dad shouted, laughing, so I left. A week later, when my lawyer called them, my parents begged me. I always knew my family was screwed up, but I never thought they'd actually throw me out like I was nothing. My sister Grace had been working for this moment for years. Ever since we were kids, she made it her mission to turn our parents against me. She would steal things and blame me, break things and say I did it, make up stories about how I was lazy, disrespectful, or just a burden. And my parents? They always took her side, no questions asked. I remember one time when we were younger, Mom's purse was on the counter, and later that day she noticed some money was missing. Grace immediately gasped and said, "Derek took it," as if she had just cracked the case. I hadn't even been near the purse, but it didn't matter. Mom's face fell in anger, and before I could get a word out, she was screaming at me that I was a liar and a thief. Meanwhile, Grace was standing behind her, smiling. She always did this, and every time she got away with it, she pushed a little further. First, she tried to convince them to throw me out by lying about me, saying that I was disrespectful, that I never helped around the house, that I stole from them. But even though they acted like they believed her, they never actually made me leave. Not until she just asked. The night before my birthday, I heard them talking about it. I was already in bed, half asleep, when I heard my door creak open slightly. I stayed still, breathing slowly, pretending to be asleep. My mom whispered, "He's asleep," then gently closed the door. I thought they were just checking on me, but then I heard them go back down the hall, their voices low. That's when I heard Grace speak. "I want him gone." That woke me up quickly. I stayed very still and listened. "He bothers me, and I'm tired of it," she continued. "I don't want to live with him anymore. I don't see why I have to share a wall with him. I want his room. I want him out." Dad barely hesitated. "Then tell him to leave. We'll support you." That was all it took. No discussion, no worries about where I'd go, just a simple agreement, as if getting rid of me was as easy as deciding what to have for dinner. Then my mother laughed. "Your room is finally going to be bigger. We can knock down the wall and connect it. You deserve it." My stomach felt like it had dropped out of my body. They weren't just okay with it. They were excited. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. I wasn't even angry at that moment, just numb. I guess part of me had always hoped, foolishly, that deep down they cared about me, that maybe one day I'd do something right in their eyes. But this? They didn't even hesitate. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table waiting for them to say it. They thought I had no idea what was coming. Grace took her time scrolling through her phone, eating her toast, dragging it out like she was savoring the moment. Finally, she looked at me with that smug little grin and said, "You should start packing. We've decided it's time for you to leave." I looked at my parents. Dad was drinking his coffee like nothing was wrong. Mom was focused on her phone, like it was just another morning. She finally looked up at me. "It's for the best. Grace deserves more space. She's a wonderful daughter, and she deserves it. She's earned it," as if I were something she had worked hard for. Grace smiled. "So you'll be gone by tonight, right?" I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just looked at her, trying to understand what I had done wrong besides being born. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." Grace beamed like she had just won an award. I packed my things that night. Not that I had much, just some clothes, my phone charger, and what little money I had saved. It was just enough for a cab. I could hear them laughing in the living room as I stuffed my life into a bag. When I stepped outside, I didn't even get a goodbye. Dad just slammed the door behind me. I stood there for a second, staring at the house I grew up in. Then I turned and walked away. I knew exactly where I was going, Grandma and Grandpa's house. I walked to the end of the street and hailed a cab. I had just enough money to get to my grandparents' house. They lived about 30 minutes away, and I spent the whole ride staring out the window, trying not to think about the fact that my own parents had just thrown me away like garbage. When I finally got there, it was late. I stood at their door for a second before knocking, suddenly feeling stupid. What if they didn't want me either? What if I had no place to go? A few seconds later, my grandmother opened the door. She was wearing her robe, her face full of concern. "Derek?" I tried to say something, but my throat tightened. She pulled me inside without another word. "What happened? What are you doing here so late?" I swallowed hard. "Mom and Dad kicked me out." Her eyes widened. "They what?" So I told her everything. How Grace had always been against me. How she finally convinced them to get rid of me. How they didn't even hesitate. I didn't want to, but when I was done talking, I couldn't stop the tears from coming. I hadn't let myself react back at the house. I had kept it all inside. But here, standing in my grandmother's warm kitchen, it hit me all at once. She hugged me tightly. "Oh, honey." Then I heard a voice behind me. "What's going on?" I turned around. My grandfather was standing there, his face hard. He had always been a quiet man, the kind of guy who didn't talk much. But when he did, people listened. I quickly wiped my face. Mom and Dad kicked me out. His jaw clenched. "They did what?" Grandma told him everything I had just told her. As she spoke, his face grew darker and darker. When she finished, he sat down at the table and was silent for a moment. Then he said, "And where exactly do you think they got this house?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Grandma sighed. "Your grandfather bought this house for them when they got married. That took me by surprise. I had never thought about it before, but it made sense. My parents had always struggled financially, but they had owned this house for as long as I could remember. I just assumed they got lucky or something." Grandpa shook his head. "They think they can kick my grandson out of a house I gave them? No, it doesn't work like that." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "I'm going to fix this." Then he looked at me. "You trust me?" I nodded. He handed me a small piece of paper with a phone number on it. "Call this man tomorrow. His name is James. Tell him who you are and explain the situation. Then don't do anything else. Just wait." I didn't quite understand what was happening, but I nodded again. Gran made me some tea, and we sat in the kitchen for a while. She kept shaking her head and muttering that she couldn't believe what my parents had done. I could barely take any of it in. The exhaustion was starting to set in, and I felt like my brain was on autopilot. Finally, she led me into the guest room. "Get some rest, sweetheart. You're safe now." I lay down and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't under the same roof as my parents and Grace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe that was a good thing. I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a second, I forgot everything that had happened. I was warm, safe, and the house was quiet. No arguing, no tension, no Grace. Then it hit me. I wasn't home, and I wasn't going back. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. My phone was on the nightstand, and when I picked it up, I saw a few missed texts from my mom. "Mom, where are you?" "Mom, you better not be at my parents' house." "Mom, you are making this harder than it has to be." I just stared at the messages. Harder for who? I didn't reply. Instead, I got dressed and went to the kitchen, where my grandma was setting the table. Grandpa was sitting with his coffee, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up. "Did you call James yet?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He slid his phone toward me. "Do it now." I picked up the paper with the number and dialed. The phone rang twice before a deep voice answered. "James speaking." I swallowed. Hi. My grandpa told me to call you. He said you could help." There was a pause. "You must be Derek." "Yeah." "All right, kid. Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. Everything. From the years of Grace turning my parents against me, to them finally kicking me out. I even told him about the conversation I overheard and the way my dad had slammed the door behind me. James listened without interrupting. When I was done, he exhaled sharply. And they're still living in that house? Yeah. Not for long. I frowned. What do you mean? Your grandpa owns that house, not them. And legally, he can do whatever he wants with it. I hadn't really processed that part yet. It was their house, as far as I had always known. But now I realized they didn't own anything. James continued. I'll handle the paperwork today. They'll get a call soon. I hung up and looked at Grandpa. What exactly is happening? He sipped his coffee. They're about to learn a very expensive lesson. By noon, the first call came. Grandpa's phone rang, and he answered it on speaker. It was my dad. What is going on? Grandpa didn't even blink. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. What else isn't clear? Dad stammered. You can't just kick us out, Grandpa chuckled. You kicked my grandson out of my house, and now you're shocked? It doesn't belong to you. You made your bed, now lie in it. I could hear my mom in the background freaking out. Grace was yelling something, but I couldn't make out the words. Grandpa, please, my mom said. We didn't mean for it to be this serious. It was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Grandpa repeated. You threw your son out like garbage. You didn't even care where he went. So now you can figure out where you will go. Dad's voice turned desperate. We have nowhere to go. Grandpa didn't respond. He just hung up. That night, they showed up. I was in the living room when I heard a car pull up outside. I peeked through the curtain. It was them. Mom, Dad, and Grace. I felt a weird mix of emotions. Anger, dread, satisfaction. But before I could react, Grandpa was already at the door. The moment he opened it, Mom started talking. Dad, please, can we talk about this inside? He didn't move. No, say whatever you need to say right here. I stepped up behind him. Grace's eyes narrowed when she saw me, but she didn't say anything. Mom looked at me, then back at Grandpa. You don't need to do this, we're family. Grandpa raised an eyebrow. Family? You mean the family you threw out last night? Dad groaned. Look, we were wrong, okay? We shouldn't have done that. But this isn't fair, you can't just evict us. Grandpa crossed his arms. Actually, I can. And I have. Grace finally spoke up, her voice sharp. This is all his fault. She pointed at me. He ran to you like a little snitch because he couldn't handle being told to leave. I laughed. I wasn't the one who asked to be kicked out. That was all you. Her face turned red. You don't even deserve that house. I do. Grandpa let out a short laugh. Then buy your own. Grace looked like she was about to explode. Mom tried again. Dad, please, we'll fix this. Just let us stay. Grandpa shook his head. No. You wanted Derek gone. Well, now you are. You have 1 week to get out, or I'll call the cops and have you removed. Dad clenched his fists, his face dark. For a second, I thought he was going to try something. But then he exhaled sharply. Fine. They turned and walked back to their car. Just before getting in, Grace spun around and glared at me. You'll pay for this. I didn't say anything. I just watched them drive away. Grandpa shut the door. Well, that was fun. I looked at him. Do you think they'll actually leave? He smirked. Oh, they will. And if they try anything stupid, I'll make sure they regret it. I thought that was the end of it. They had a week to move out, and I figured they'd spend that time complaining and trying to guilt-trip Grandpa into changing his mind. I was wrong. Because 2 days later, I woke up to find out my parents had reported me missing. I was in the kitchen, eating breakfast, when my grandma's phone rang. She answered. And I could tell right away something was off. Yes, this is his grandmother. What do you mean, missing? I froze my spoon halfway to my mouth. Grandpa put down his newspaper. Who is it? Grandma looked at me. It's the police! I nearly choked. She listened for a moment longer, then sighed. Yes, he's here. He's been here since the night they threw him out. A pause. No, he's not in danger. No, we did not kidnap him. He came here on his own. At that point, Grandpa stood up and took the phone from her. Officer, Let me make something clear. My own daughter kicked this boy out with nothing but the clothes on his back. He had nowhere to go, so he came to his grandparents' house, which, by the way, I own. Now, if you want to investigate something, maybe start with why they abandoned their son in the first place. The conversation didn't last much longer. Grandpa was calm but firm, and by the end of it, the officer apologized for the confusion and promised to close the case. The second Grandpa hung up, my phone started buzzing. Mom? I ignored it. A minute later, a text came through. You've made this worse than it needed to be. The cops were just here. Come home and fix this. I laughed out loud. Come home? Were they serious? Grandpa shook his head. They're trying to cover their asses. They probably realized how bad it looks that they kicked you out, and now they're panicking. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong again. That night, they broke in. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a noise downstairs. At first, I thought maybe Grandma had left a window open or something. But then I heard voices, low, urgent whispers. I sat up, my heart pounding. Then I heard the sound of the back door unlocking. I jumped up and ran to Grandpa's room, shaking his shoulder. Someone's in the house! His eyes snapped open, and within seconds he was up. He grabbed something from his nightstand, I didn't see what, and motioned for me to stay behind him. We crept down the hallway toward the kitchen, where the sound was coming from. Then we saw them, my parents and Grace, standing in the dark right inside the back door. Grace saw me first. Oh, look, the little snitch is awake. Grandpa flicked on the light. What do you think you're doing? Dad didn't even flinch. We came to talk. Through the back door? Grandpa's voice was ice. Mom crossed her arms. You weren't answering our calls. We had no choice. Grandpa scoffed. Breaking and entering was your only option? Dad ignored him and looked at me. Derek, enough. Pack your stuff. You're coming home. I stared at him. You kicked me out, remember? Mom stepped forward. We made a mistake, okay? We were upset and we acted too fast. But we've thought about it and we've decided you can come back. You just have to apologize to Grace. I almost laughed. Apologize for what? Grace smirked. For causing all this drama. I was speechless. Grandpa wasn't. Get out. Dad glared at him. You can't keep him here. Grandpa tilted his head. My house, my rules, and I'm done playing nice. That's when I saw what he had grabbed from his nightstand. A gun. He wasn't pointing it at them, but he didn't have to. Just holding it was enough. Grace's smirk vanished. Mom took a step back. Dad clenched his fists. Grandpa's voice was calm. I've given you every chance to walk away from this with some dignity. But if you don't leave right now, you're going to find out exactly how serious I am. No one moved. Then Dad exhaled sharply. Fine. They turned and left through the back door. But just before leaving, Grace glanced at me. This isn't over. Then they were gone. Grandpa locked the door behind them, double-checking it. He turned to me. They try something like this again. I'm calling the cops. The next morning, Grandpa called. I was still on edge from what had happened the night before. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept checking the windows as if I expected my parents and Grace to come back. I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at my untouched plate of eggs when Grandpa walked in with his coffee and phone in hand. He didn't even look at me. Time to end this for good. He dialed the number and put the phone on speaker. After a few rings, my father answered. Hello? Grandpa didn't waste any time. You listen to me, and you listen good. You're going to pack up and leave this house by the end of the week, just like I told you, and you're not going to bother Derek ever again. Dad scoffed. Or what? Grandpa leaned back in his chair, completely calm. Or I rewrite my will. Silence. Then Mom's voice came over the phone. You wouldn't, Grandpa chuckled. Try me. I stared at him, confused. What does that mean? I whispered. He covered the phone and looked at me. It means I was going to leave them something when I died, but now not a damn dime. Dad's voice was tight. You're bluffing. You think so? Grandpa replied. I have my lawyer on speed dial. I can have everything changed by the end of the day. That house you live in, Gone. Every last thing I've set aside for you, gone. And guess who gets everything? He looked at me. It took me a second to process what he was saying. Grandpa wasn't just kicking them out. He was cutting them off completely. Mom's voice came back full of panic. Dad, please. We made a mistake. You can't just disown us for that. Grandpa raised an eyebrow. Oh, like you disowned your own son? Dad tried a different approach. Okay, fine. We'll leave the house. But you don't have to be so extreme. I do, Grandpa interrupted, because I know you two. You're never going to stop trying to manipulate him. You'll keep scheming, keep twisting things, keep making his life miserable. Well, not anymore. You burned that bridge. It's gone. Grace finally spoke up. So what? You're giving him everything? Grandpa smiled. That's right. The house, the money, everything. It's Derek's now. I almost dropped my fork. Wait, what? Grandpa just nodded. You heard me. You're staying here. This is your home now. Dad was furious. You're seriously giving everything to him over us? Grandpa sighed like he was bored. Yep. Grace lost it. That's not fair. Grandpa let out a sharp laugh. Neither is life. Get over it. Dad muttered under his breath. Mom sounded like she was crying. Grace kept screaming in the background. But Grandpa was done. You have until the end of the week, he said. If you're not out by then, I'm calling the cops. Then he hung up. I sat there speechless. Grandpa took a sip of his coffee. Well, that was fun. And that was it. At the end of the week, my parents and Grace packed up and moved into a rented apartment. Grandpa made sure they knew there was no coming back. I expected them to try something. Another trick. Another stunt. But they didn't. I think they finally realized there was nothing left for them to take. Grace sent me one last text before she blocked me. Enjoy the house, loser. I hope it was worth losing your family. I didn't reply, because for the first time in my life, I actually felt like I had a family. Grandma and Grandpa were there for me in a way that my parents never were. They supported me, encouraged me, and for the first time, I wasn't just tolerated in my own home. I was wanted. A few weeks later, Grandpa sat me down and handed me a set of keys. You belong here, boy, he said. This house is yours now. I stared at him, completely overwhelmed. Are you sure? He nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. And that was that. I moved into the house permanently, and life finally started to feel normal, peaceful. No more walking on eggshells. No more fighting to prove myself to people who never really cared. As for my parents and Grace, they never tried to contact me again. I guess once they realized I was no longer a resource for them to use, they stopped caring. And honestly, that was fine with me.